Violet's feet ached, a familiar thrum against the diner's worn linoleum, another double shift at Sal's, another mountain of plates, another stack of bills waiting at her tiny Bronx apartment. 26 years old, and every penny she earned disappeared into rent, groceries, and Liam's tuition fund. Her little brother, bright as a new penny, deserved a future brighter than the fluorescent hum of a diner kitchen. During a rare lull, leaning against the counter, her order pad lay open. Not for a customer's meal, but for the looping curves of ASL signs. Dream, hope, brother. She traced them with a pen, the familiar movements a silent comfort, a promise. Night school interpreter in training wasn't just a dream, it was Liam's lifeline. The bell above the door jingled, not a cheerful chime, but a sharp, cutting sound that sliced through the diner's usual din. Heads snapped up, then just as quickly snapped down. Whispers fizzled out. A hush fell, heavy and palpable, like a sudden drop in temperature. Violet's gaze, drawn by the silence, found him. Leonardo Ferraro. He moved with a quiet power, an effortless grace that belied the tension he created. His dark suit, perfectly tailored, seemed to absorb the light, making him a shadow against the bustling backdrop. He was 25, barely older than her, yet his presence commanded an ancient, wary respect. He didn't speak, didn't need to. The Ferraro name hung in the air, a silent warning. He slid into his usual booth by the window, a corner table that offered him a view of the street, but kept him just out of reach. His eyes, dark and piercing, swept across the room, missing nothing, despite his deafness. Violet had seen him before, always alone, always ordering with a simple, precise hand gesture for black coffee, no sugar. Other waitresses hurried past his table, avoiding eye contact, their smiles tight and forced. They saw a problem, a complication, a silent threat. Violet saw something else. A man wrapped in an impenetrable shell, a profound, almost crushing isolation. She felt a strange pull, a flicker of empathy she immediately tried to suppress. Her life was complicated enough. Today, though, was different. Brenda, new and flustered, approached Leonardo's booth. Violet watched, a knot forming in her stomach. Brenda, already stressed from a spilled milkshake incident, gestured vaguely at the menu, then tried to mouth, "Coffee?" Leonardo's brow furrowed, a subtle shift in his otherwise impassive face. He signed back, his movements fluid, clear. Brenda blinked, confused, then offered a strained, apologetic shrug. "I'm sorry, honey, I don't—" "What was that?" She spoke louder, as if volume would bridge the gap. Leonardo's jaw tightened. He tried again, slower, his hand clearly forming the sign for coffee. Brenda, defeated, just shook her head, a helpless, "I don't get it," on her lips. The frustration radiating from Leonardo was a tangible thing, a quiet storm building in his dark eyes. Violet's heart hammered. Every instinct screamed at her to stay put, to let Brenda fumble, to not get involved with him. But the sight of that quiet frustration, that familiar sense of being unheard, was too much. Liam had felt that way sometimes before she learned how to truly communicate with him. Taking a deep breath, she walked over, her order pad a flimsy shield. "Brenda, I got this." She didn't wait for a response, just turned to Leonardo. Her hands, usually fumbling with plates, felt suddenly heavy yet steady. "Coffee," Violet signed, her movements a little stiff but clear. "Coffee." She kept her gaze steady, refusing to look away, refusing to show the tremor in her hands. Leonardo froze. His sharp eyes, which had been narrowed in frustration, widened almost imperceptibly. A flicker of something, surprise, intrigue, sparked in their depths. It was like watching a statue come to life, just for a split second. He watched her, truly watched her, for a long moment. Then his hands moved, slow, deliberate, black, no sugar. His signs were practiced, elegant, a stark contrast to her beginner's efforts, but they were clear. For the first time, in this diner, in his isolated world, someone had spoken his language, someone had seen him. Violet felt a blush creep up her neck, a strange mix of triumph and fear. She nodded, a small, genuine smile touching her lips. Got it. She turned and walked away, her mind racing, the image of his startled, then intrigued, eyes burned into her memory. The diner hummed around her, but a new electric silence had settled between her and the silent air. The week crawled by in a blur of clattering dishes and hurried orders, but the memory of Leonardo Ferraro's startled eyes, then the slow, elegant movement of his hands signing black, no sugar, remained etched in Violet's mind. It was a strange warmth in her chest, a feeling she couldn't quite place, wrapped tightly in a knot of apprehension. Getting involved with the Ferraros was like stepping onto a live wire, and she knew it. Liam's tuition, her hard-won independence, everything was too precarious to risk. Friday evening. The diner finally exhaled its last customer, and Violet, bone-weary but relieved, peeled off her apron. The cool night air outside Sal's was a welcome balm after hours of grease and steam. She clutched her worn purse, the meager tips rattling inside, her thoughts already on the subway ride home, the textbook waiting on her nightstand. The Bronx Little. Italy markets were winding down, the scent of garlic and ripening tomatoes still hanging faintly in the air. Most stalls were shuttered, leaving the street quieter than usual, a little too dark. She was halfway down the block when a shadow detached itself from the alleyway ahead. Then another and another, 3 young men, swaggering, loud, their laughter jarring in the quiet street. They looked familiar, the kind of small-time thugs who hung around the edges of things, trying to look important. One of them, a lanky kid with a sneer, had been in the diner earlier in the week, making a scene about his order being wrong. Violet had just shrugged him off, used to the type. Now he seemed to remember her. "Look who it is," the lanky kid drawled, blocking her path. His eyes were cold, calculating. "The little waitress who thinks she's too good to serve a gentleman." Violet's heart leaped into her throat. "Excuse me, I don't want any trouble." She tried to step around them, but another boy, beefier and radiating menace, sidled closer, effectively boxing her in. "Trouble finds you, sweet cheeks, when you got an attitude like that," the lanky one sneered. "And your friend, the quiet one. Heard he's got a temper, don't like people disrespecting his kind." His words were laced with a thinly veiled threat, a veiled reference to Leonardo, tying her to him in a way that made her stomach clench. They weren't just bothering her, they were making a statement, using her as a pawn. Fear, cold, and sharp, snaked through her veins. She was outnumbered, alone. Just as the beefy one reached out a hand, a sudden shift in the air, a silent ripple of unease, made them all freeze. It wasn't a sound, it was a presence. The thug's eyes, which had been fixed on Violet with malicious glee, suddenly darted past her, their bravado visibly deflating. Violet, sensing the change, slowly turned. Leonardo Ferraro stood there at the mouth of the alley, a silent, imposing figure. He hadn't made a sound, hadn't gestured, hadn't even raised his voice. He simply was. His dark suit seemed to melt into the shadows, his face unreadable, his eyes fixed on the 3 young men. There was no anger, no overt threat in his gaze, just an intense, unwavering stillness that was more chilling than any shout. The Ferraro name didn't need words, it spoke volumes in the sudden, terrified silence. The lanky kid who moments ago had been a picture of aggression swallowed hard. His eyes darted nervously between Leonardo and his companions. The beefy one visibly paled, his hand dropping from Violet's arm as if burned. Without another word, without a glance back, the three thugs melted away, scattering like roaches exposed to light. One moment they were there, a tangible threat. The next they were gone, leaving only the lingering smell of fear in the air. Violet stood frozen, her breath catching in her throat. Her legs felt like jelly. She was safe, undeniably safe, and he was still there, a few yards away, watching her. The dim streetlights cast long shadows, but she could still feel the weight of his gaze. He didn't move, didn't sign, didn't make a sound, but his eyes met hers across the quiet street. In that silent exchange, a flicker of something passed between them, a quiet acknowledgement of her fear, her vulnerability, and his unspoken protection. It was a dangerous, intoxicating understanding. He held her gaze for a long moment. Then, with a subtle, almost imperceptible nod, he turned. Just as silently as he had appeared, he walked away, his dark figure swallowed by the deeper shadows of the street. Violet watched him go, heart hammering, a strange cocktail of fear and wonder swirling inside her. The powerful, silent man had stepped into her world, and for a terrifying, exhilarating moment he had claimed a small, undeniable piece of it. She was safe, yes, but her world felt irrevocably altered, charged with a new, electric tension. The following week, Leonardo Ferraro became a fixture at Sal's. Not every day, but often enough that his presence began to feel less like an intrusion and more like a strange, unsettling rhythm. He still sat in his corner booth, still ordered black coffee with a silent, elegant sign. But now, his dark eyes, sharp and intelligent, weren't just sweeping the room, they were finding Violet. They lingered as she moved, as she took orders, as she refilled water glasses. She felt the weight of his gaze, a phantom touch on her skin that made her nerves hum. It wasn't aggressive, not overtly, but it was there, an insistent, unwavering observation. She would catch herself checking her reflection in the stainless steel backsplash, wondering if her hair was neat, if her uniform was clean. It was ridiculous. He was a Ferraro, she was a waitress. During lulls, when the diner emptied to a scattered few, Violet still pulled out her order pad, tracing signs. Learn, understand, speak. She was trying to master the nuances of ASL, the subtle shifts. In expression, the rhythm that gave a silent language its voice. Once, she'd been practicing the sign for curiosity, a gentle poke at her cheek, when she looked up and found Leonardo watching her. He hadn't looked away. Instead, a faint, almost imperceptible curve touched the corner of his lips, a ghost of a smile. He left a $50 bill under his coffee cup that day. Far too much for a single cup of coffee, but she couldn't bring herself to refuse it. It felt like a payment for something. More than a drink, an acknowledgement she didn't quite understand. One drizzly afternoon, after her shift, Violet was pulling on her jacket outside Sal's, hunched against the damp chill. The street was quiet, the usual market bustle muted by the weather. She heard no footsteps, no rustle of fabric, yet she knew he was there. She turned, her heart giving a nervous jolt. Leonardo stood a few feet away, his dark coat gleaming with moisture, his expression unreadable. He raised his hands, slow and deliberate. "You learn sign?" he asked, his signs precise, almost formal. Violet's hands trembled slightly as she signed back, trying to match his clarity. "Yes, night school, interpreter training." She felt a surge of pride, quickly followed by a flush of self-consciousness. Was she good enough? Was he testing her? His eyes, dark and intense, held hers. "Good," he signed, then paused, his gaze thoughtful. "Voice, beyond speech." He tapped his temple. "Important." Violet nodded, a lump in her throat. It is, for communication, for understanding. She gestured vaguely, trying to convey the depth of her belief. He signed again, a flicker of something raw, almost vulnerable in his eyes. My family, they see deaf, weakness, not voice, not strength. His hands conveyed a quiet frustration, a heavy burden. I want community, investment, not fear. Her breath hitched. This was more than just a conversation. He was opening a window, however small, into his world, into the very core of his silent struggle. She saw the ambition, the quiet force of his beliefs battling against the perception of his own blood. Just then, a sleek black sedan pulled up to the curb, idling silently. The back window glided down, revealing an older man, silver-haired, with eyes that held the weight of a kingdom. Vittorio Ferraro, Leonardo's father, the Don. His gaze, sharp and assessing, swept over Violet, then settled on his son. There was concern there, a father's. Worry, but also a profound weariness, a calculating glint that spoke of power and danger. He didn't smile. He just nodded, a curt, imperious gesture. Leonardo stiffened almost imperceptibly, his body language shifting from open frustration to a rigid, impenetrable deference. He signed something quickly to his father, too fast for Violet to catch, then turned back to her, his expression once again impassive. I must go. His signs were abrupt, final. Violet felt a chill deeper than the rain. She had just seen the gilded cage, glinting with power, but also locking in a profound isolation. Vittorio's presence, his silent command, had swallowed Leonardo's brief moment of openness, pulling him back into the shadows. The car door opened, and Leonardo, without another glance, stepped inside. The window rolled up, sealing him away. Violet stood alone on the damp sidewalk, watching the sedan disappear down the street. The brief, intense connection had been severed, leaving her with a dizzying mix of fear, empathy, and a burning curiosity she knew was dangerously unwise. She had glimpsed the man behind the Ferraro name, and his world, she realized, was far more complex and far more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. And she, a simple waitress, had somehow irrevocably stepped into its orbit. The invitation arrived not as a spoken word, but as a folded slip of paper tucked under her coffee cup. No handwriting, just a simple, elegant drawing of a seahorse. The vintage, coin-operated ride from the New York aquarium that Leonardo had mentioned once, a small piece of his own quiet history. Below it, a precise address, a time, and the signed word, meeting. No questions, no pleas, just an expectation. Violet's stomach fluttered with a mix of dread and a defiant curiosity she couldn't silence. She knew, deep down, that accepting this invitation meant stepping onto a path far more dangerous than late-night shifts and overdue bills. But Liam's tuition hovered in her mind, a beacon she desperately needed to reach. The address led her to a quiet street in Little Italy, to the unassuming facade of a bakery she knew was Ferraro-owned, a legitimate front in a labyrinthine empire. The smell of fresh bread was comforting, but her nerves hummed with an entirely different kind of scent, danger. She pushed open the door, the bell above her head jingling softly. A young man, built like a brick wall, nodded curtly, then gestured towards a heavy wooden door at the back. No words, just a silent, undeniable command. Violet swallowed, her heart thumping against her ribs, and walked into the shadows. The room was not what she expected, not opulent, not overtly threatening. It was a private office, warm with the scent of old wood and faint coffee, a single large desk dominating the space. Leonardo stood by the window, his back to her, looking out at the brick buildings opposite. He turned as the door clicked shut behind her, his dark eyes instantly locking on two. Hers. He wore a simple, impeccably tailored shirt, no tie, looking less like a Mafia heir and more like a man burdened by immense responsibility. There was no warmth in his gaze, but no malice either, just that familiar, intense scrutiny. He gestured to the two chairs arranged opposite his desk, then took his seat. Violet sat, clutching her purse, her hands already damp. The silence stretched, heavy and profound, broken only by the distant hum of city traffic. Then he began to sign. His movements deliberate, precise. I just need a voice. His gaze was unwavering. My eyes, my ears. Someone I can trust. Inside. My family's dealings. Public engagements. He leaned forward slightly, his expression grave. Someone to speak for me, when others refuse to hear. Violet felt a chill run down her spine. The dangerous proposal she'd anticipated was here, laid bare. He wasn't asking for a waitress. He was asking for a shield, a weapon, a confidant in a world she couldn't comprehend. She saw the cost, stark and terrifying, her independence, her boundaries, the very safety she so carefully cultivated around Liam. He paused, letting his words sink in, then signed again. The compensation will be substantial. Enough for your brother's tuition, for your studies, to lift your burdens. The words hit her like a physical blow. Liam, tuition, freedom from the crushing weight of bills. It was everything she dreamed of, offered to her on a silver platter. But the platter was laced with poison. Her internal conflict raged, a furious battle between fear and desperate hope. Violet started to sign, her hands shaking slightly. This is dangerous. Your world, it is not mine. She looked at him, trying to convey the enormity of her apprehension. My brother. He needs me safe. My boundaries. They are important. Leonardo watched her, his expression softening almost imperceptibly, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. He signed back, his hands moving with an almost hypnotic rhythm. I understand your fear. My world is not kind, but my code is clear. He placed a hand over his heart, then signed outwards. Community, investment, growth, never let violence speak first. His eyes held hers, seeking connection, seeking understanding. I want to change how things are done, but I cannot do it alone, not when they see my deafness as a weakness to exploit. He was revealing a vulnerability, a desperate plea for an ally in a hostile world. He wasn't just a powerful heir, he was a man struggling against the tides of his own family, against ableism, against violence, and he saw her as his solution. Violet felt the pull, strong and undeniable. His vision, his struggle resonated with her own deep-seated empathy, but the danger, the suffocating risk was still there, a constant hum beneath his impassioned signs. She felt the weight of his gaze, the unspoken plea, the raw honesty in his movements. The power dynamic was clear. He was Ferraro, she was not. Yet in this moment, communicating through the silent language, he treated her with a fierce, unwavering respect for her agency. He wasn't demanding, he was asking. And the question hung in the air, electric and terrifying, demanding a choice that would change everything. The decision had not come easily. Days bled into nights, each hour a battlefield of conflicting emotions. Liam's bright, hopeful face floated before her. Eyes, then the dark, intense gaze of Leonardo Ferraro, his hand signing a future of community investment, not violence. The tuition for Liam, the promise of a life free from the constant gnaw of poverty, was a siren song, pulling her towards a dangerous shore. But it wasn't just the money. It was the flicker of vulnerability she'd seen in Leonardo's eyes, the quiet strength of his vision, the injustice of his isolation. She saw the good in him, a different path for the Ferraro name, and she, with her hands and her voice, could be the one to help him forge it. Her fear remained, a cold knot in her stomach, but it was now overshadowed by a fierce, protective resolve. She would step into the shadow. For Liam, and, she realized with a jolt of alarm, for something else, something she couldn't yet name, that drew her irrevocably towards Leonardo. Her first mission began on a Tuesday, under a sky bruised with impending rain. She met Leonardo not in a backroom, but outside a sprawling, dilapidated building in a struggling part of the Bronx, a former warehouse now slated to become a community center gym. He was already there, impeccably dressed, but with a practical edge, his gaze sweeping over the building with a focused intensity. Other figures milled around, architects, community leaders, a few wary-looking locals. The air buzzed with suppressed excitement and underlying tension. As Violet approached, Leonardo turned, his eyes meeting hers. There was no need for words, no signed greeting. A silent acknowledgement passed between them, a shared understanding of the pact they had made. She was here. She was ready. He led her into the cavernous space, the raw concrete echoing their footsteps. The air was cool, smelling of dust and forgotten dreams. He began to sign, describing his vision for the center, a place for youth, for fitness, for a community often overlooked. Violet, standing beside him, found her voice, interpreting his precise, impassioned signs. He envisions a space where young people can find discipline, mentorship, and a safe haven from the streets. Her words carried his conviction, giving his silent plea a powerful resonance. She watched, listened, and interpreted. She saw the community leaders, initially skeptical, lean in, their expressions shifting from doubt to genuine interest as Leonardo's vision unfolded through her voice. She saw the architects, at first dismissive of a Mafia air, quickly grasp the seriousness of his intent, their own plans becoming more ambitious, more respectful. But she also saw the subtle power plays, the architects who tried to slip in costly, unnecessary features, the community leaders who hinted at personal favors, the hidden agendas that lurked beneath polite smiles. Leonardo, however, was astute. His dark eyes missed nothing. When an architect, through Violet's interpretation, suggested an extravagant marble-clad entrance, Leonardo signed, his movements firm. No, practical, accessible. The funds are for the community, not for show. Violet interpreted, feeling a surge of respect. He wasn't just throwing money around, he was building something real, with integrity. As the day progressed, moving from the echoing warehouse to a smaller, cramped office filled with blueprints, Violet felt the unique rhythm of their partnership solidify. She was not just a translator, she was his conduit, his shield, his mirror. Every nuance of his expression, every subtle shift in his body. Language, she internalized, then externalized through her voice, making sure his meaning was precise, his authority undeniable. There were moments, brief but potent, when their eyes would lock across the table, a flicker of mutual understanding passing between them, a shared smile when a complex plan finally clicked into place. Once, as she interpreted his signs for a particularly intricate architectural detail, he reached out, his hand brushing her arm lightly, a silent correction in his. Signing. The brief touch, accidental or not, sent a jolt through her, a warmth spreading through her veins that had nothing to do with the stuffy room. Later, as they walked back out into the drizzly afternoon, the sounds of the city muted around them. Leonardo signed, "You understand more than most." Violet met his gaze, her heart thrumming. "I try," she signed back, her hands feeling more confident now. "To hear what isn't spoken." He nodded, a profound intensity in his dark eyes. "You do." His gaze lingered on her, a silent acknowledgement that transcended the professional. There was a quiet strength in his presence, a dangerous magnetism that drew her in. She knew with a certainty that both thrilled and terrified her, that a powerful, unspoken attraction was building between them, rooted in this shared purpose, this unique connection, pulling her deeper into his world. The shadows were indeed dangerous, but they were also unexpectedly luminous. The Ferraro family. Dinner was a spectacle of understated opulence. Violet, squeezed into her best and only black dress, felt like a sparrow among peacocks in the grand, dimly lit dining room of Vittorio Ferraro's sprawling mansion. Crystal chandeliers dripped silent light onto polished mahogany, and an army of silent staff moved with ghost-like efficiency. She sat beside Leonardo, a silent sentinel, her hands ready, her senses heightened. The air was thick with the scent of rich food and even richer power. Leonardo, in a dark suit that made him seem even more imposing, was a focal point, yet still isolated. Family members, all dressed in varying degrees of expensive formality, circulated, their laughter echoing a little too loudly. Violet interpreted Leonardo's occasional brief signs to his father, Vittorio, who watched his son with that familiar mix of wary pride and concern. Every conversation felt like a chess match. Then he arrived, Carmine, Leonardo's cousin. He swept into the room with an almost theatrical charm, a dazzling smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. His suit was a touch too flashy, his cologne a little too strong. He moved straight for Leonardo, embracing him with a backslapping joviality that felt utterly false to Violet. "Leo, my favorite cousin!" Carmine boomed, his voice carrying easily. He signed a quick, exaggerated hello to Leonardo, one that was technically correct but lacked the fluid grace of genuine ASL. "Heard you're making waves with this new community. Zenta, our quiet leader, finally making some noise." He winked, a glint of something sharp in his eyes. Violet, interpreting Leonardo's curt, polite reply, felt a prickle of unease. Carmine's words, though outwardly supportive, carried a subtle condescension, a veiled jab at Leonardo's deafness, his quiet leadership. She met Carmine's gaze briefly, and in his smile she saw not warmth, but a calculated ambition. He was playing a game, and Leonardo was his opponent. Later that week, the first incident struck. Leonardo was at a small community outreach event, a meet and greet at a local library he was helping to fund. Violet was by his side, interpreting his hopeful, articulate vision for the library's expansion. The event was going well, the community responding positively to Leonardo's genuine interest. Then it happened. A crucial document, a detailed infographic outlining the library's budget and plans, was suddenly replaced. On the large projector screen, instead of the carefully prepared figures, a garbled, nonsensical image of a child's crude drawing of a monster flashed for a solid minute, accompanied by a blast of distorted, screeching audio. A collective gasp rippled through the small crowd. People exchanged confused, embarrassed glances. Leonardo, caught off guard by the sudden silence and the strange visual, looked around, his brow furrowed in confusion. Violet's heart hammered. She knew instinctively this was no accident. She quickly signed to Leonardo, explaining the chaotic image on the screen, the jarring noise. His jaw tightened, a flash of frustration in his eyes, but he maintained his composure, signing for everyone to remain calm. The library manager, flustered, scrambled to fix the projector, apologizing profusely. The moment of positive momentum was shattered. replaced by an awkward silence and whispered doubts. Leonardo, the capable leader, had just been made to look disorganized, incompetent, perhaps even a little ridiculous. As the manager finally restored the correct image, Violet's gaze swept the room, and then she saw him. Carmine. He stood near the back, ostensibly chatting with a local councilman, but his eyes were fixed on Leonardo. A faint, almost imperceptible smirk played on his lips, quickly masked when he caught her looking. It was there, then gone, but Violet had seen it. That smug satisfaction. Leonardo, stoic as ever, continued his presentation, but the energy of the room had shifted. The seed of doubt had been planted. Later, as they left, Leonardo walked in silence, his shoulders a little heavier. He didn't need to say anything. Violet felt the weight of his frustration, the injustice of it. "Carmine," Violet signed, her hands tight with certainty. He was there. He smiled. Leonardo stopped, turning to her. His dark eyes, usually so guarded, held a flicker of surprise, then a deep, knowing understanding. He didn't question her. He simply nodded, a slow, deliberate movement. His trust in her instincts was a silent acknowledgement of her intelligence, and it solidified something vital between them. The air around them, already charged with unspoken threats, now hummed with a dangerous, shared secret. Violet knew, with chilling clarity, that this was only the beginning. The call came late, a frantic message from one of the community leaders. "The gym! It's been hit!" Violet's stomach dropped. She rushed to the site, the unfinished community center gym, Leonardo's vision, now a stark tableau of senseless destruction. Walls, freshly painted in hopeful shades, were defaced with crude, violent graffiti. Exercise equipment, still in its crates, was smashed open, components scattered. But it wasn't just random chaos. The blueprints for the building's new accessible entrance, laid out on a table for review, were torn and stained, smeared with paint. It was precisely targeted, designed to undermine the very principles Leonardo stood for. Accessibility, community, order. Leonardo was already there, a silent sentinel amidst the wreckage. His shoulders were rigid, his hands clenched at his sides. He didn't shout, didn't rage. His anger was a palpable force, a quiet storm brewing behind his unreadable eyes. Vittorio Ferraro, flanked by two formidable men, arrived shortly after, his face a mask of grim concern. His wary gaze, already intense, now drilled into Leonardo, a silent question hanging in the air. Can you control this? Can you handle it? The incident, Violet knew, was a direct assault on Leonardo's competence, his ability to lead. Violet moved through the debris, her eyes scanning, searching for answers beyond the obvious. This wasn't just vandalism, it was a message. And she knew exactly who sent it. As she helped a volunteer salvage some undamaged supplies, she caught a glimpse of movement outside. Carmine. He stood across the street, talking animatedly on his phone, a concerned frown on his face that didn't quite reach his eyes. His presence was always just a beat too early or a beat too late, always offering hollow sympathy when the damage was done. Violet felt a cold dread settle in her chest. His ambition was a growing menace, insidious and relentless. Later, huddled with Leonardo in a makeshift office amidst the chaos, Violet signed, her hands tight with frustration. It's Carmine. He was there. Again, he's always there, offering concern, but his eyes, they smile. She explained the specific targeting of the accessible entrance plans, the deliberate nature of the destruction. It's not random, it's calculated, to make you look weak, out of control. Leonardo listened, his expression grave. The pressure on him was immense, a crushing weight of expectation and suspicion from his own family. But his trust in Violet was unwavering. He didn't dismiss her suspicions. He absorbed them, his dark eyes reflecting her certainty. He signed, "My father. He sees this. He worries. Carmine. He knows where to strike." He leaned forward, his gaze intense. "What else? What do you see?" Violet's mind raced, connecting the dots. The library mishap, now this. The patterns were forming, chillingly clear. Carmine's method wasn't brute force. It was insidious, designed to corrode from within, to make Leonardo fail publicly. She pulled out her order pad, flipping past the ASL doodles. On a clean page, she began to sketch, to jot down cryptic notes. Library, projector swap, loud sound. Gym, targeted plans, graffiti. Carmine. Always present, false sympathy. She was building a case, a silent, damning indictment. As she finished, Leonardo reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small, exquisite lapel pin, shaped like a tiny, stylized squid, its tentacles swirling gracefully. He offered it to her. "For you," he signed, his voice in her head soft, yet firm. "The squid. It is intelligent. It sees in the dark. It adapts. It navigates the depths." His eyes met hers, a silent message passing between them. "You are my eyes. You are my navigator." Violet's fingers trembled as she took the pin. It was small, discreet, yet profoundly significant. A symbol of his world, a mark of his trust, a dangerous gift. She felt the weight of it, the responsibility it carried. The menace of Carmine's ambition was growing, but so was the strength of their bond, forged in shared purpose and a silent understanding. This was more than just a job. It was a partnership, a perilous dance in the shadows, and she was ready to navigate its terrifying depths. The vandalized gym cast a long shadow over everything. Vittorio Ferraro's wary gaze, once a distant concern, now felt like a physical weight on Leonardo, and by extension, on Violet. The incidents, subtle at first, then increasingly brazen, had achieved their insidious purpose. Whispers followed Leonardo, doubts about his judgment, about his control, about his very suitability to lead. Violet overheard them in hushed tones at the diner, at the market. The silent air was losing ground, and she, his interpreter, his voice, was caught in the crossfire. Vittorio, instead of pushing Leonardo forward, now held him back. A proposed community outreach program one Leonardo had championed was quietly shelved. A meeting with city officials about urban renewal, a key project for Leonardo's vision, was attended by Carmine instead. The message was clear, unspoken but undeniable. Leonardo was being tested, and in his father's eyes, he was failing. Or perhaps Violet's influence was being questioned, her presence seen as a liability rather than an asset. She felt the chill of it, the tightening noose of danger. One evening, leaving the diner, a figure detached itself from the shadows near her subway stop. Not one of the thugs from before, but a cleaner, sharper man she recognized as one of Carmine's close associates. He blocked her path, his face impassive. "Heard you're getting real close to Leo, little bird," he drawled, his voice low, almost a purr. "Real close to the family. Sometimes little birds, they get tangled in the wires. Best to fly free, eh? Before the cage snaps shut." He didn't touch her, didn't threaten overtly, but the meaning was clear, brutal in its simplicity. Mind her own business. Get out. Before it was too late. Violet's breath hitched in her throat. The cold fear that had been a dull throb in her chest now flared, sharp and agonizing. The risk. It wasn't just to her. It was to Liam. What if Carmine, emboldened, reached for her? Brother used him as leverage? The thought sent a jolt of ice through her veins. Her hard-won boundaries, her carefully constructed safety net, felt fragile, ready to tear. She couldn't sleep that night. Liam's sleeping face, innocent and trusting, was a constant reproach. She pictured herself walking away, telling Leonardo she couldn't do it, couldn't risk Liam, couldn't risk herself for a fight that wasn't hers. The tuition money was tempting, but what was money if Liam wasn't safe? She could. Step back, disappear from his dangerous orbit, return to the simple, hard struggle of her old life. It would be safer, saner. She considered it, truly considered abandoning the silent heir to his fate. The next day, she went to the bakery, not to resign, but to find answers. Leonardo was in the back office as usual. He turned as she entered, his dark eyes immediately picking up on the tremor in her hands, the tension in her shoulders. He didn't need words to know something was wrong. Violet. Signed, her hands shaking slightly. Carmine's man. He warned me to leave, to fly free. He mentioned tangled wires. She didn't need to elaborate on the implication. Liam, my brother. The risk. It feels too great. My boundaries. She trailed off, looking at him, a desperate plea for understanding in her eyes. Leonardo's gaze was unwavering, intense. He listened, his expression grave, absorbing every nuance of her fear. Then, slowly, deliberately, he began to sign, his movements firm, resolute. I understand. Your fear. It is real, but my family's succession, it is ruthless, more than you know. He paused, his eyes holding hers, revealing a stark truth. Carmine, he wants to paint me, unfit, to show I cannot control my own affairs, my own people, my own voice. His hands moved, expressing a deep internal battle. If I fail, if I am removed, it will not be for peace. It will be for violence, for the old ways. And Carmine, he will wield it. Stepped closer, his presence radiating a quiet power that both intimidated and reassured. You are not just my voice. You are my eyes, my mind. You see what others miss. You hear what is not spoken. You found the patterns. You understand the truth. His hand reached out, not to touch, but to hover an inch from her arm, a gesture of profound connection. Your courage. It is a strength they do not expect. They do not comprehend. His eyes, dark and fathomless, searched. Hers, conveying a vulnerability he rarely showed. If you go, I lose. My only true ally. My only voice that they listen to. The only one who sees me, not just the Ferraro heir. Violet felt the weight of his words, the enormity of the trust he placed in her. He wasn't just a powerful, isolated man. He was a man fighting for his vision, for a different future for his family, for a community, and he believed, truly believed, that she was essential to that fight. Her fear for Liam remained a cold knot, but now a fierce resolve, born of shared purpose and a burgeoning, dangerous loyalty, began to burn brighter. She saw the ruthlessness of his world, yes, but she also saw the unwavering integrity of the man before her. She was not just a waitress, not just an interpreter. She was his confidant, his partner. And she knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that she couldn't leave him. Not now. The silence of her tiny apartment pressed in, but Violet's mind was anything but quiet. It buzzed with the echo of Carmine's smug smile, the ghost of his associate's warning, and the chilling pattern of his orchestrated incidents. The cold fear for Liam was still there, a constant hum, a primal protective instinct, but now a new fire burned beneath it. It was for Leonardo, for his vision, for the quiet, resolute man who trusted her with his future, with his voice. Her burgeoning feelings for him, a dangerous, undeniable current, fueled her resolve, pushing her past caution into a fierce determination. She wouldn't just protect him, she would fight for him. She spread her order pad across her small kitchen table, the paper crinkled and stained with old coffee rings. Her ASL doodles, peace, strength, truth, were now interspersed with frantic notes. Library, projector swap, loud sound, gym, targeted plans, graffiti, Carmine, always present, false sympathy, security, lax at library exit, community meeting, technical difficulties. Each scribbled word, each connected arrow painted a grim picture. Carmine wasn't just trying to make Leonardo look incompetent. He was building a narrative, a public persona of a volatile, unstable leader. He was systematically discrediting him, piece by agonizing piece. Violet traced the connections, her brow furrowed. These weren't random acts. They were calculated, designed to erode trust, to make Vittorio Ferraro question his son, to make the community doubt him. And the closer she looked, the clearer it became. Carmine was aiming for a grand finale, a public outburst, a spectacular failure designed to permanently paint Leonardo as unfit, leaving the path clear for himself. The thought sent a shiver down her spine. He wouldn't stop until Leonardo was utterly broken, his vision shattered. Then the news broke, not through a formal announcement, but through the chatter in Sal's, the whispers of the regulars who knew everyone and everything. The annual Ferraro Foundation fundraiser was fast approaching, a high-profile, exclusive event, and this year it was to be held at the New York Aquarium, after hours. Leonardo Ferraro was slated to be there, representing the family, presenting his vision for future community projects. Violet froze, her hand halfway to a coffee pot. The aquarium. The pieces clicked cold and sharp into place. A high-profile event, a captive audience of influential figures and press, the perfect stage for Carmine's decisive move. It was too public, too important, for anything less than a grand, orchestrated humiliation. Her gut twisted. This was it. This was Carmine's target. She found Leonardo later that afternoon in the back office of the bakery, surrounded by blueprints for the community center. His usual intensity was sharpened by the ongoing battle, his face etched with a quiet weariness. He looked up as she entered, his eyes, dark and knowing, immediately meeting hers. Violet didn't waste time. She signed, her hands moving with urgent precision. The aquarium fundraiser, I heard. It's too perfect. Carmine, he'll use it. He's building to this a big, public incident. Her hands conveyed the certainty, the dread she felt. He wants to paint you, completely unfit, before everyone. Leonardo watched her, his expression unreadable, but the tightness around his mouth, the subtle clench of his jaw, betrayed his understanding. He didn't argue, didn't doubt her. He trusted her instincts completely. He signed back, his movements slow, deliberate. You are right, I feel it. The pressure, it is building. But what then? How do we stop him? Violet's mind raced, fueled by adrenaline and a desperate need to protect him. They needed to be smarter, to anticipate, to turn the tables. She looked at the scattered blueprints, then back at Leonardo, a thought sparking. He's been planning this for a while. These incidents, they're practice, tests. She leaned forward, her voice low, her hands emphatic. What if he's tried something before? At the aquarium? A smaller test run? Something we missed? Leonardo's dark eyes widened almost imperceptibly, a flicker of surprise, then immediate understanding. He hadn't considered it. He signed, his gaze intense. Past incidents. At the aquarium. He tapped his temple, a silent command for her to think, to search. A shared silence fell between them, electric with urgency and the weight of their dangerous partnership. Violet felt the thrill of it, the undeniable connection that hummed between them. They were in this together, two unlikely allies against a ruthless enemy. And the first step, she realized, was to unravel the past, to find the hidden threads of Carmine's malice before he could weave his final destructive tapestry. The aquarium fundraiser loomed, a glittering trap waiting to snap shut. Violet felt the urgency thrumming beneath her skin, a constant, low-level anxiety. Carmine was playing for keeps, and the silent arena of the deep-sea tanks was his chosen battlefield. She needed information, something, anything, to unravel his meticulous plotting. Leonardo trusted her, his faith a heavy, precious weight she refused to drop. Her night school connections were her only shot. She reached out to Maya, a classmate who worked part-time event security for smaller venues, a side gig to fund her own interpreting degree. Maya, always eager to share industry gossip, put her in touch with Marco, a lower-level security tech at the New York Aquarium itself. Violet framed her request carefully. She was working on a paper about communication challenges and accessibility protocols at large, high-profile events. She wanted to know about their emergency procedures, their incident response. Marco, a nervous young man who seemed perpetually on the verge of spilling a secret, agreed to meet her for coffee near the aquarium's staff entrance. He fidgeted with his spoon, his eyes darting around the bustling cafe. Violet kept her voice calm, professional, her questions general at first. How do you manage crowd control? What about technical issues? Power outages? Marco shrugged, sipping his lukewarm coffee. Standard stuff. Generators kick in. We've got protocols for everything. Mr. Thorne, the head of security, he's a stickler. His voice was flat, practiced. Violet leaned forward, her gaze unwavering. And what about unexpected incidents? Things that aren't in the manual? Say, a power flicker during a high-profile gala, or something that might cause confusion for guests? She watched him closely, every nuance of his expression. Marco's fidgeting intensified. His eyes, already nervous, darted away, fixed on a spot over Violet's shoulder. A bead of sweat traced a path down his temple. Yeah, well, those are rare. Super rare, and if anything does happen, Mr. Thorne handles it. Personally. Keeps everything under wraps. For the VIPs, you know. Doesn't want bad press. He gave a weak, forced laugh. A sudden, cold logic clicked into place in Violet's mind, chilling her to the bone. He cut the lights to isolate Leonardo during a fundraiser. The line from the synopsis, a half-forgotten detail, exploded into chilling clarity. Marco's evasiveness, his insistence on Mr. Thorne's personal handling of incidents, the casual mention of bad press, it all screamed cover-up, a power cut, deliberate, not an accident, but a carefully orchestrated attack, just like the library projector, the vandalized gym, Carmine's insidious handiwork. So Mr. Thorne is very discreet, Violet pressed, her voice steady despite the adrenaline now rushing through her veins. No records of these rare incidents, nothing a junior tech would ever see. Marco's face paled further. He finally met her eyes, a flicker of genuine fear in their depths. Look, I don't know anything about that. Mr. Thorne's orders are clear. Anything sensitive, it goes through him, straight to him. He's got direct access to the main servers, the backup. Footage, everything. He wipes anything that needs wiping, makes sure things stay clean. He gulped, then pushed his coffee cup away. I really gotta go. I've already said too much. He stood abruptly, practically bolting from the table, leaving Violet with a racing heart and a terrifying new piece of the puzzle. Mr. Thorne, the head of security. He wasn't just covering up, he was erasing. He was Carmine's accomplice, a hidden hand in the Ferraro family's inner circle, actively participating in discrediting Leonardo. The thought made her stomach clench. The betrayal ran deeper than she could have imagined. Marco's nervous, inconsistent statements, his fear-filled eyes, they were all threads leading directly to Thorn, a man whose loyalty to Carmine was clearly stronger than his professional integrity. The aquarium wasn't just a stage, it was a crime scene waiting to happen, and the man guarding it was already compromised. The aquarium fundraiser loomed, a glittering trap, waiting to snap. Shut. Violet felt the urgency thrumming beneath her skin, a constant low-level anxiety. Carmine was playing for keeps, and the silent arena of the deep-sea tanks was his chosen battlefield. She needed information, something, anything, to unravel his meticulous plotting. Leonardo trusted her, his faith a heavy, precious weight she refused to drop. Her night school connections were her only shot. She'd pressed Marco, the nervous security tech, gently about the backup systems, the redundancies, that every security setup had to have. He'd mumbled about an old, rarely checked archive server in a forgotten corner of the basement. A system so outdated, Thorn probably forgot it existed. It was a long shot, a desperate gamble, but it was all she had. That night, after her shift, instead of heading home, Violet found herself outside the aquarium, the vast, dark building looming like a silent leviathan. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She had to be invisible, fast. Using a discarded staff, path she'd found near the loading dock, and remembering a back entrance Marco had pointed out for deliveries, she slipped inside. The chill of the empty corridors, the distant hum of the filtration systems, made her skin prickle. She was trespassing, risking everything. She found the basement, a maze of pipes and shadows, eventually locating the dusty, unlabeled door Marco had described. Inside, amidst forgotten equipment and spiderwebs, sat a single ancient server tower, humming faintly. Her hands trembled as she connected her own small, portable hard drive, a relic from her night school tech classes. It took an agonizingly long time, the old system groaning, but then a flicker, a file name. Ferraro Gala 2022, raw footage. Her breath hitched. Back in the relative safety of her apartment, the screen of her old laptop glowed in the dark. Violet's fingers flew across the keyboard, skipping through hours of static and blurry angles. Then she found it. The Ferraro Gala, the opulent crowd, and Leonardo standing near the shimmering jellyfish tank, signing eloquently. Suddenly, the lights flickered, then plunged the area into near darkness. Panic ripped through the crowd. Leonardo, disoriented, turned, his hands instinctively reaching out, searching for something, someone. He was isolated, exposed. The camera, still recording on the old system, zoomed out slightly, and there, in the periphery, standing near a control panel, was Carmine. A quick, almost imperceptible flick of a switch. A smug, triumphant smirk that flashed across his face in the residual light before he melted back into the shadows. But it wasn't just Carmine. Another figure entered the frame, moving with deliberate speed. Mr. Thorn, the head of security. He didn't rush to help Leonardo. Instead, he moved directly to a hidden console, his fingers flying across the keys. A small, almost invisible red light blinked on, then off. He was not just witnessing the incident. He was actively participating. Covering it up. The feed from the main security cameras, the ones Marco had mentioned, went blank for a crucial minute. Erased. Violet felt a cold rage coil in her gut. It wasn't just a cousin's ambition. It was a calculated, insidious betrayal from within. Thorn, a trusted employee, was a snake in the grass. ensuring Leonardo's public humiliation was scrubbed from the official record, making it seem like a mere unfortunate accident. She couldn't wait. The sun was barely up when she arrived at the bakery, her pocket projector clutched in her hand. Leonardo was already in his office, the quiet intensity of his focus palpable. He looked up, his dark eyes instantly taking in her disheveled state, the fierce determination on her face. Violet didn't speak. She moved to the blank wall, her hands already flying, plugging in the tiny projector. The blue-white light sprang to life, casting the raw, unedited footage onto the wall. Leonardo watched. His initial confusion slowly melted into stunned disbelief as Carmine's smug face flashed on the wall as the lights plunged, as he appeared disoriented and alone. Then the grim comprehension tightened his jaw as Thorn appeared, methodically erasing the official records. The betrayal, so starkly illuminated on the wall, was a punch to the gut. His hands clenched, his knuckles white. His face was a mask of shock, then a slow, burning fury. He hadn't seen it, hadn't known how deep it went. Not just Carmine, but Thorn. A man he had trusted. A man in a position of power, complicit in his undoing. He turned to Violet, his dark eyes blazing with a mix of gratitude and a raw, silent pain. He signed, his movements sharp, almost violent in their precision. Thorn. Betrayal. He works for Carmine. It wasn't a question, it was a statement, a grim understanding settling over him. Violet nodded, her own heart aching for the weight of this revelation on him. She signed back, her hands gentle but firm. Yes, he covered it up. Made sure no one would see. They want to make you look weak, unfit. Leonardo closed his eyes for a moment, a slow, deep breath escaping him. When he opened them, the raw pain was still there, but now it was tempered by a fierce resolve. He looked at the footage still playing silently on the wall, then at Violet. He signed, his gaze locking with hers, unwavering. This changes everything. We fight. Together. A profound silence filled the room, heavy with the weight of their shared secret. The depth of the betrayal, and the undeniable bond that now solidified between them. Their trust, already deep, had been forged anew in the crucible of this dark truth. Violet felt a tremor of fear, but also an exhilarating sense of purpose. She wasn't just his interpreter, she was his co-conspirator, his confidant, and together they would face the shadows. The damning footage from the aquarium played silently on Leonardo's office wall, a chilling loop of betrayal. Carmine's smug flick of a switch, Thorn's swift practiced erasure of the main feed. Leonardo watched it again, his jaw so tight Violet thought it might crack. The initial shock had hardened into a cold, quiet fury, a dangerous stillness that hummed with purpose. He turned to Violet, his dark eyes blazing with an intensity that burned away every last trace of her fear. He didn't need to sign. His unwavering gaze was a promise, a demand. We fight. Violet nodded, her own resolve a steel rod in her spine. There was no going back, no second-guessing. Liam's tuition, her own hard-won independence, they were now inextricably tied to this battle. But more than that, it was for Leonardo, for the future he envisioned, a world where his voice, silent but powerful, could finally be heard. She moved closer, her hands flying, urgent and precise. The fundraiser, she signed. It's the last chance. Carmine will make his move. We have to make ours first. Leonardo signed back, his movements sharp, decisive. How? He controls Thorn, the security. He will try to isolate me again. His frustration was a tangible thing, a silent roar. Violet held his gaze, her mind racing, fueled by adrenaline. Yes, he will. But we have the truth. He doesn't know we have this. She gestured to the projector, still playing Carmine's smirk on the wall. "We can't just show it to you. We have to show it to everyone. In public. When he thinks he's won." She began to outline the plan, her hands flowing, articulating a strategy born of desperation and fierce loyalty. The aquarium is perfect. All those influential people, the press, Vittorio Ferraro himself. Carmine will be there, waiting for his moment. We need to turn his stage into ours. She explained her vision, not just the raw footage, but a clear, irrefutable narrative. We project it onto a tank, a huge one, the jellyfish tank maybe, blue light, dramatic, so everyone sees. And then you speak through me. Your story, the truth. Leonardo listened, his dark eyes, never leaving her hands, absorbing every word, every nuance. He saw the brilliance in her plan, the courage it demanded, the sheer audacity of turning Carmine's weapon back on him. He signed, a slow, deliberate movement. "They will try to stop us. Thorn. He will be watching." "We anticipate," Violet signed back, her chin lifting. "We find a blind spot, a moment of distraction. We use the element of surprise. Carmine expects a reaction from you, a silent fury. He expects you to be a victim. We show them a leader." She paused, her eyes locking with his. "You tell your story, your vision, your code, the way you've always wanted to." A profound silence settled between them, heavy with the weight of the plan, the immense risk, the absolute trust. Leonardo reached out, his hand gently taking hers, his fingers curling around her trembling ones. He didn't sign, but his eyes conveyed a message deeper than any words. "My future, my family's honor. It's all in your hands." He was placing everything he had, everything he was, in her judgment, in her voice. He believed in her completely, in her ability to speak louder than any of his family's silent threats. Violet felt the enormity of it, the terrifying, exhilarating burden of his trust. She was no longer just a waitress, no longer just an interpreter in training. She was his partner, his co-strategist, his voice for justice. Her skills, once a means to an end for Liam's tuition, were now the very instrument of their fight. Later, that afternoon, back in her apartment, the silence was different, no longer oppressive, but charged with anticipation. She pulled out the crumpled application form she'd picked up from night school weeks ago, the one for her official interpreter's badge. She smoothed it out, her pen poised. Name: Violet Anderson. Qualifications: interpreter in training. Purpose: to bridge divides, to give voice to the unheard. She filled it out, her hand steady, her signature firm. This badge, she realized, was more than a professional credential. It was a symbol of her commitment, her courage, and her readiness to use her voice for a profound, dangerous purpose. The aquarium awaited, and Violet, with Leonardo by her side, was ready to make them all listen. The New York aquarium shimmered under the city lights, a glass and steel marvel that tonight held a captive audience. Inside, after hours, it was transformed into a glittering cavern, alive with the hushed murmur of elegant guests. The blue-lit tanks cast an ethereal glow, illuminating schools of silent fish and swaying kelp, creating a mesmerizing, almost dreamlike atmosphere. Violet, in a borrowed black dress that felt too tight and too formal, felt a profound unease. She was a fish out of water, surrounded by silk and diamonds, by the heavy scent of expensive perfume and even heavier power. Influential figures, prominent socialites, and a smattering of press mingled amidst the hypnotic aquatics, all here for the annual Ferraro Foundation fundraiser, Vittorio Ferraro, a formidable shadow in a corner, surveyed the scene with the quiet intensity of a king watching his court. His soldiers were outside, unseen, a silent, deadly perimeter. Violet stood beside Leonardo, her heart thrumming against her ribs like a trapped bird. He was a beacon in the polished chaos, his dark suit perfectly tailored, his presence radiating an unwavering calm. He acknowledged greetings with a subtle nod, his dark eyes missing nothing, his hand occasionally resting lightly on her arm when a question was directed his way, a silent cue for her to interpret. She felt the weight of his trust, the terrifying, exhilarating burden of it. The pocket projector, small and cold, was concealed in her evening bag, a secret weapon waiting for its moment. Then Carmine appeared. He moved through the crowd with an almost predatory grace, his smile dazzling, a practiced performance of charm. He shook hands, clapped backs, his voice a smooth, confident baritone that carried easily over the ambient hum. He was a man utterly convinced of his own triumph, radiating a smug confidence that made Violet's stomach clench. His eyes, however, were never truly engaged. They constantly darted, searching, until they found Leonardo. A subtle shift in his demeanor, a flicker of something sharp and calculating. He was circling, preparing for the kill. He approached them, his smile widening, a hand outstretched to Leonardo. "Leo, my boy." A magnificent turnout, wouldn't you say? His voice was loud, drawing attention. He signed a quick, almost dismissive hello to Leonardo, then turned to Violet, his gaze lingering a fraction too long, a veiled threat in its depths. "And our charming interpreter, always by Leo's side, a real asset." The word hung in the air, dripping with sarcasm, implying she was nothing more than a useful tool. Violet felt a flush rise to her cheeks, but she met his gaze, refusing to back down. She interpreted Leonardo's cool, polite response, her voice steady. Carmine laughed, a theatrical sound that grated on her nerves. "Yes, yes, always so. Eloquent when you have someone to speak for you, eh, Leo?" He took a step closer, lowering his voice, though still loud enough for those nearby to hear. "But tell me, cousin, how do you truly lead a foundation when you can't even hear the concerns of the people, when your vision is filtered through others?" The air around them thickened. Carmine's words were a calculated public challenge, a direct assault on Leonardo's credibility, his very fitness to lead. He was attempting to isolate Leonardo, not with darkness this time, but with the suffocating weight of public doubt, painting his deafness as an insurmountable weakness. Violet saw the subtle shifts in the faces of the onlookers, the knowing glances. The trap was sprung. Leonardo remained stoic, his face impassive, but Violet felt the tension coiling in his shoulders, a tremor of controlled fury. He was waiting. Carmine pressed on, his voice a silken weapon. "Perhaps, Leo, it's simply too much for you. A quiet life, a consultant role, that's no shame. But to lead, to guide a family empire, a foundation that demands a strong voice." He let the words hang, a thinly veiled accusation that Leonardo was incapable, unfit. He even took a step back, gesturing broadly, as if inviting the crowd to observe Leonardo's silence, his perceived inability to defend himself. Violet's heart hammered, a frantic drum against her ribs. This was it, the moment, Carmine's final, decisive move. The raw injustice of it burned through her, overriding her fear. She met Leonardo's eyes, a quick, intense exchange. His gaze was unwavering, a silent command. Now. He was ready. She was ready. The pocket projector, cold and heavy in her hand, felt like a promise. Carmine's voice, thick with insinuation, hung in the glittering air, a venomous echo against the hypnotic blue of the jellyfish tank. To lead a family empire, a foundation that demands a strong voice. He took another step back, a calculated move to highlight Leonardo's silence, to let the crowd's judgment settle. He expected Leonardo to flinch, to rage silently, to be the victim he had so carefully crafted. But Leonardo stood firm, his gaze unwavering, a quiet defiance burning in his dark eyes. He didn't react as Carmine expected. He simply waited. Violet's heart hammered, a frantic beat against her ribs. The injustice of it, the cold, manipulative cruelty of Carmine's attack burned through her. Every nerve ending screamed at her to act, to shatter this suffocating silence. She met Leonardo's eyes, a fierce, silent question passing between them. His gaze was unwavering, a silent command. Now. Her hand, trembling only slightly, reached into her evening bag. The small, cold weight of the pocket projector was a promise. With a surge of breathtaking courage, Violet stepped forward, placing herself directly beside Leonardo, facing the stunned, murmuring crowd. Carmine, caught off guard by her sudden movement, faltered, his smug smile momentarily dissolving into a frown of annoyance. He opened his mouth, no doubt to dismiss her, to belittle her. But he never got the chance. With a swift, decisive motion, Violet activated the projector. A brilliant blue-white light burst from the tiny device, momentarily blinding. Then, with a gasp that rippled through the elegant crowd, the damning security footage from the previous gala flashed, undeniably real, onto the huge blue-lit jellyfish tank behind Leonardo. The ethereal glow of the jellyfish was instantly overshadowed by the stark, grainy reality of the past. The opulent crowd from the previous fundraiser, the sudden flicker, then the plunge into near darkness, Leonardo's disoriented figure, isolated and vulnerable. Then there he was, Carmine's face, captured in the periphery, illuminated by the ghostly light, his hand flicking a switch, a smug, triumphant smirk. Twisting his lips as he plunged his cousin into chaos, the gasps grew louder, turning into shocked murmurs. But it wasn't over. The footage shifted, showing the swift, practiced movements of Mr. Thorne, the head of security, moving directly to a hidden console. His fingers flew across the keys. A small, almost invisible red light blinked on, then off. The main security feed, the one meant to protect Leonardo, went blank for a crucial minute. Erased. The complicity, the calculated betrayal was laid bare for every horrified eye to see. Carmine's face, moments ago radiating smug confidence, was now a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. His jaw went slack, his eyes wide with a desperate, dawning horror, as the truth, projected in vivid, undeniable light, shattered his carefully constructed lies. He was exposed, his ambition caught in the harsh glare of his own deceit. Leonardo, bathed in the blue light of the projected footage, remained absolutely still. He didn't look at Carmine. His dark eyes swept across the faces in the crowd, then settled on his father, Vittorio Ferraro, whose wary expression had slowly, almost imperceptibly, transformed. The lines of concern deepened, but now beneath them was a fierce, undeniable pride. Then Leonardo began to sign. His hands, usually so elegant and controlled, moved with a new, potent force, an eloquence that transcended spoken words. Violet, her voice clear and strong, amplified his silent defense, her words ringing with conviction through the hushed hall. "My cousin Carmine has worked tirelessly to paint me as unfit," Violet's voice resonated, interpreting Leonardo's powerful signs. "He cut the lights at a previous fundraiser, seeking to disorient me, to make me appear incompetent. And the head of our security, Mr. Thorne, was complicit, actively erasing the evidence." Her voice trembled slightly, not with fear, but with the raw emotion of the truth. Leonardo's signs continued, unwavering, laying bare his vision, his code. This family, the Ferraro name, has a choice: to cling to the old ways, violence, deceit, fear, or to embrace a new path. A path of community investment, of integrity, of respect, never letting violence speak first, never letting deceit overshadow truth. His eyes, fixed on his father, held a profound challenge, a desperate hope. My deafness is not a weakness. It is a perspective, a unique strength. It has taught me to see beyond words, to value true communication, to build bridges, not walls. Violet interpreted every sign, every nuanced expression, her voice imbued with his unwavering conviction. She was not just his voice, she was the vessel for his truth, for his courageous stand. The crowd was utterly silent, captivated by the silent heir's powerful defense, amplified by the damning images flickering behind him. Vittorio Ferraro watched his son, his gaze intense, his once wary expression now fully transformed into one of fierce, undeniable pride. The fight was far from over, but in this luminous moment the truth had finally found its voice. The blue-lit tank still shimmered with the ghostly image of Carmine's smug face, then Thorne's swift, damning betrayal. The gasps in the New York aquarium had faded into a stunned, horrified silence, broken only by the frantic clicks of press cameras. Violet, still standing beside Leonardo, felt a strange mix of exhaustion and exhilarating triumph. Her voice, hoarse from interpreting, had carried his truth. And the world had listened. Carmine, his face a grotesque mask of shock and fury, stood frozen, his eyes darting wildly between the projected footage and the faces of the influential guests. His carefully constructed empire of lies had just crumbled, spectacularly, before everyone. He looked at Leonardo, a raw, impotent rage twisting his features, but he couldn't speak, couldn't deny the undeniable. Vittorio Ferraro stepped forward, his presence commanding immediate attention. His eyes, fixed on Carmine, were cold, devoid of mercy. He didn't shout, didn't raise his voice. His words, though quiet, cut through the buzzing silence like a knife. "Carmine Ferraro," he announced, his voice carrying the weight of generations, "you have betrayed this family's trust, its code, and its future. Effective immediately, you are exiled from all family business. You will leave this place, and you will not return." The finality in his tone was absolute. Carmine, pale and defeated, opened his mouth as if to protest. But the look in Vittorio's eyes silenced him completely. With a final venomous glare at Leonardo, he turned and stalked out, swallowed by the shocked crowd. The press, sensing blood, surged forward, their questions a torrent. "Mr. Ferraro, what does this mean for the foundation, for the family's succession?" But their eyes, Violet noticed, kept returning to her. The brave interpreter, the woman who had dared to speak truth to power. They lauded her courage, her quick thinking, her intelligence. She had not only saved Leonardo, but in doing so, had carved out her own undeniable space in this dangerous world. The flashing lights, the shouted questions, the sudden, overwhelming attention. It was dizzying. But through it all, one thought gleamed clear: Liam's tuition. It was secured, undeniably, irrevocably secured. The crushing weight of poverty, of constant struggle, was finally lifting. Leonardo turned to her, his dark eyes burning with an intensity she'd never seen before. He didn't need to sign. His gaze conveyed everything: profound gratitude, immense respect, a silent acknowledgement of her unwavering loyalty. He reached out, his hand gently covering hers, a silent, powerful claim. He saw her, not just as his voice, but as his partner, his equal in this victory. The chaos of the room faded, becoming a distant hum. Violet looked at Leonardo, at the man who had drawn her into his dangerous orbit, who had trusted her with his very future. Her journey had been terrifying, exhilarating, pushing her boundaries further than she ever thought possible. She had risked everything, and in doing so, had found a courage she didn't know she possessed. Her independence, her carefully guarded self, had been tested, but not broken. Instead, it had grown, strengthened by purpose. Her heart, which had once trembled at his presence, now beat with a fierce, unwavering devotion. She had walked into his shadow, but she had emerged in the light, standing tall beside him. Her final choice was clear, made not out of obligation or fear, but out of a deep, abiding respect and a love that had blossomed in the most unexpected of places. She would stay. She would be his voice, his partner, his confidant. But it would be on her terms, on terms of equality and mutual respect. Their future, she realized, was theirs to build, together. And for the first time in a long time, Violet Anderson felt truly, wonderfully free. Months had spun into a vibrant tapestry since that electric night at the aquarium. The city, ever-changing, now hummed with a different kind of energy, one Violet felt deep in her bones. The dilapidated warehouse in the Bronx, once a symbol of neglect, now stood bright and bustling. The new Ferraro Community Center. Its glass doors gleamed, a state-of-the-art gym hummed with activity, and a fully accessible entrance welcomed everyone. Every detail, from the textured pathways to the integrated sign language classes, whispered of Leonardo's vision, a testament to what truth and a voice could accomplish. Violet walked past it often, a quiet pride swelling in her chest. Her own life, once a relentless grind, had blossomed. The official interpreter's badge, a sleek silver rectangle bearing her name, now clipped proudly to her professional blazers. She still took on diverse assignments, lending her voice to countless stories. But she often worked by Leonardo's side, not as an employee, not as a subordinate, but as a partner. She interpreted his meetings, his public appearances, his quiet conversations with community leaders. Her voice was his, and his vision, through her, shaped their world. Her career was flourishing, a testament to her courage and skill. Liam's tuition fund was secure, a solid, unshakable foundation for his future. The financial anxieties that had once shadowed her every step were gone, replaced by a liberating sense of purpose. Their relationship, too, had settled into a luminous, respectful rhythm. There were no grand declarations, no sweeping gestures, not in the way stories usually told. Instead, it was built on shared silences, on the intense, knowing glances that passed between them across a crowded room, on the quiet strength of his hand finding hers when they walked through the bustling streets. He valued her intellect, her empathy, her unwavering spirit. She saw his quiet power, his fierce integrity, the depth of his heart. They were two equal halves of a whole, speaking a language understood by few, yet felt by many. Their connection was a deliberate choice, made every day, rooted in the trust forged in the crucible of danger. One sunny Saturday, they found themselves at the New York Aquarium during regular hours this time, not for a high-stakes fundraiser, but for a simple shared moment. Children's laughter echoed through the vast halls, their faces pressed against the glass. They stopped by the vintage coin-operated seahorse ride, a relic from Violet's past, now gleaming with fresh paint and true to Leonardo's commitment, updated with accessible features for all children. It whirred and clacked, carrying delighted toddlers up and down in its gentle, rhythmic motion. Leonardo watched the children, a rare, soft smile touching his lips. He reached into his pocket, pulling out the tiny squid lapel pin he had given her. He didn't offer it back. Instead, he simply held it, then turned it in his palm, a silent acknowledgement of their journey, their shared depths. Later, that week, a formal announcement arrived. The Ferraro Foundation had established a new endowment, the Violet Anderson Scholarship for Aspiring ASL Interpreters, to fund night school tuition and provide mentorship for students from underserved communities. It was a subtle, elegant gesture, a public acknowledgement of her impact, a recognition that went beyond mere gratitude. It wasn't just in her name. It was a testament to her voice, her chosen path, her inherent worth. Violet looked at the announcement, tears pricking her eyes. She had stepped into the shadows to protect Liam, to fight for Leonardo's vision. She had found courage she didn't know she possessed, and in doing so, she had found herself. Her journey with Leonardo was just beginning on equal footing, their voices, his silent, hers spoken, heard clearly, respected by all. The future, she knew, was not just safe, but luminous. If you enjoyed the video, tell us where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel to keep up with our content.